The encrypted satellite phone buzzed against Dr. Sarah Mitchell's hip at 0347 hours, cutting through the silence of the underground laboratory buried 3 stories beneath the Nevada desert. She'd been awake for 36 straight hours, her hands steady despite the exhaustion as she calibrated the final sequences of what the Pentagon called Project Nightfall, a classified biodefense operation that could save millions of lives from an emerging pandemic threat. The caller ID showed her ex-husband's number. David never called during her classified assignments. Never. The unwritten rule of their fractured marriage was that when Sarah disappeared into the black world of government operations, she became unreachable until the mission ended. "Sarah, thank God you answered." David's voice cracked through the static, raw with panic. "It's Ethan. You need to come home, now." Her 8-year-old son's name hit her like a physical blow. "What happened?" "The doctors, they say he has maybe 48 hours. Sarah, he's asking for you." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. 3 days earlier, Dr. Sarah Mitchell had kissed her son goodbye at 5:30 a.m., promising him she'd be back in time for his Little League championship game the following weekend. Ethan had been fighting a cold. Nothing serious, just the usual sniffles that 8-year-olds picked up at school. She'd left extra vitamin C gummies on the kitchen counter and told David to call if the fever spiked. That was Tuesday. Now it was Friday, and everything had changed. Sarah Mitchell wasn't supposed to exist in the public record. Officially, she was listed as a research consultant for a pharmaceutical company in Denver. In reality, she was one of 12 biodefense specialists cleared for the government's most sensitive operations, the kind that never made headlines because they prevented disasters that never happened. At 34, she was the youngest person ever to hold her security clearance, a fact that both impressed and intimidated her colleagues. Her life existed in 2 separate worlds that never intersected. There was Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the divorced mother who attended parent-teacher conferences, packed school lunches, and worried about whether Ethan was making friends. Then there was Agent Viper, her operational call sign, who spent weeks in underground facilities, abandoned warehouses, or hostile territories, working to neutralize biological threats before they could reach American soil. The Nevada facility where she currently worked was investigating samples from a potential bioweapon discovered in Eastern Europe. Intelligence suggested a terrorist cell had developed a modified strain of hemorrhagic fever that could spread through water supplies. Sarah's job was to create a rapid deployment vaccine, a task that required absolute focus and zero outside contact. When she'd accepted this assignment, Ethan had been healthy, happy, and excited about starting 3rd grade. David, despite their complicated relationship, had been supportive. Their divorce 2 years earlier hadn't been acrimonious. They'd simply grown apart under the strain of Sarah's career demands. She loved her work, loved knowing that her expertise protected innocent people, but the cost was constant absence from her son's life. "Mommy saves people," Ethan would tell his friends when they asked what she did for work. It was close enough to the truth. The Nevada operation was supposed to last 2 weeks. Sarah had planned to return home Thursday evening, giving her Friday to decompress and Saturday to watch Ethan pitch in the championship game. He'd been practicing his curveball all summer, and she'd promised to teach him the grip she'd learned from her own father, a former minor league pitcher. Instead, she was 3 stories underground at nearly 4 a.m., staring at a satellite phone while her ex-husband's words echoed in her mind. "He's asking for you." Sarah's hands trembled as she set the phone down. Around her, the laboratory hummed with the sound of centrifuges and climate control systems. Her research team, Dr. Marcus Webb from the CDC, biochemist Dr. Lisa Chen, and military liaison Colonel Rick Anderson, were scattered throughout the facility, each focused on their portion of the vaccine development. They were close to a breakthrough, perhaps 12 hours away from a working prototype that could save thousands of lives. But her son was dying. The irony wasn't lost on her. She spent her career developing treatments to save strangers, yet she couldn't cure whatever was killing her own child. David had said the doctors were baffled. Ethan had developed severe symptoms seemingly overnight: high fever, difficulty breathing, internal bleeding. The tests showed cellular breakdown consistent with an aggressive autoimmune response, as if his own body was attacking itself. Sarah pulled up her son's last text message, sent 3 days ago. "Mom, when you come home, can we make pancakes? The dinosaur-shaped ones." She'd responded with a heart emoji and promised they'd make a whole dinosaur family. Her reflection stared back at her from the laboratory's reinforced glass window. Blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, dark circles under green eyes that had seen too much classified horror, the small scar above her left eyebrow from a laboratory accident during her graduate work at Johns Hopkins. She looked like what she was, a woman caught between two impossible responsibilities. The facility's communication protocols were strict. No external contact during active operations unless specifically authorized by the mission commander. Breaking protocol wasn't just a career-ending offense, it could be classified as treason, depending on how sensitive the current operation was deemed. Sarah had signed documents acknowledging that her family emergencies, while regrettable, could not supersede national security concerns, but those were just words on paper, until your child is dying. She thought about the first time she'd held Ethan, how impossibly small he'd seemed, how fierce the protective instinct that had overwhelmed her. She'd made him a promise that day, silently, as David slept in the hospital chair beside her bed, that she would always keep him safe, no matter what. Now that promise was being tested in ways she'd never imagined. Her secure workstation displayed the current vaccine progress. They were so close. Her specific expertise in rapid protein synthesis was crucial to the final phase. If she left now, the project could be delayed by weeks, maybe months. During that time, the bioweapon could be deployed, could kill thousands. But if she stayed, she might lose the only person who had ever called her mommy. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to think clearly. Her training had taught her to compartmentalize, to analyze situations logically rather than emotionally, but logic felt inadequate when faced with the voice of her 8-year-old son, weak and confused, asking through David's phone, "Mommy, when are you coming home? It hurts really bad." The laboratory felt suddenly claustrophobic. Despite its spacious design, every beep from the equipment seemed too loud, every fluorescent light too bright. Sarah realized she was hyperventilating and forced herself to breathe slowly, methodically, the way she'd been trained for high-stress situations. But no training had prepared her for this moment, when being a mother and being a patriot demanded opposite choices, when saving the world meant abandoning her son, and saving her son might mean abandoning her duty to protect countless others. The encrypted phone sat silent on the lab bench, waiting for her decision. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Sarah's fingers hovered over the emergency authorization keypad mounted beside her workstation. One sequence of numbers would connect her directly to Mission Commander General Patricia Hayes, 3 time zones away at the Pentagon. Another sequence would trigger an immediate medical evacuation protocol, reserved for life-threatening emergencies affecting cleared personnel. She chose neither. Instead, she walked to the secure elevator that connected the underground facility to the surface. Her badge granted access to all levels, a privilege that came with her specialized clearance. The elevator climbed silently through reinforced concrete and steel, past layers of security that protected America's most sensitive biological research. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly under a canopy of stars she rarely saw during underground assignments. The facility's surface entrance was disguised as a weather monitoring station, complete with fake meteorological equipment and a small trailer marked National Weather Service. Sarah had always found the deception oddly comforting, a reminder that the most important work often happened invisibly. Her personal phone, locked away in her surface-level locker, per security protocol, contained 17 missed calls from David. The voicemails painted a picture of escalating medical crisis that made her stomach clench with each message. "Sarah, they're moving Ethan to intensive care. His white blood cell count is... The doctors haven't seen anything like this. The pediatric oncologist wants to run more tests. They think it might be some kind of aggressive leukemia, but the presentation is all wrong. He keeps asking when you're coming home. I don't know what to tell him anymore." The final message was from Dr. Rachel Torres at Denver Children's Hospital, someone Sarah didn't recognize. "Dr. Mitchell, this is regarding your son Ethan. We need to discuss his condition immediately. His symptoms are unusual. Please call as soon as you receive this." Sarah's medical training kicked in as she processed the clinical language. Unusual symptoms, aggressive presentation, unknown etiology. In her world of biodefense, those phrases carried ominous implications. She dialed Dr. Torres directly. "Dr. Mitchell, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for hours." The pediatrician's voice carried the careful control that medical professionals used when delivering devastating news. "I need to ask you some very specific questions about Ethan's recent exposure history." Exposure history? Sarah's blood ran cold. "His cellular damage patterns are unlike anything we've documented in pediatric medicine. The rate of progression, the specific organs affected, it's almost as if his immune system received instructions to destroy healthy tissue in a very targeted way." Sarah sank onto a concrete barrier outside the weather station facade. Through her classified work, she'd studied biological agents that could cause similar symptoms. Weaponized pathogens designed to trigger autoimmune cascades. But those existed only in laboratory samples and intelligence reports. They weren't loose in suburban Denver, attacking 8-year-old boys who collected baseball cards and worried about math tests. "Dr. Torres, I need you to isolate my son immediately. Full quarantine protocols." "Dr. Mitchell, I don't understand. This doesn't appear to be contagious. We've tested other family members, school contacts, everyone in his immediate environment. No one else is showing symptoms." "Please, trust me on this, and I need you to preserve samples of everything, blood, tissue, any biological material. Store them at -80 degrees Celsius." "Are you suggesting this might be intentional? Some kind of poisoning?" Sarah couldn't answer that question without revealing classified information. But the timing felt too convenient, too targeted. She was working on Project Nightfall, developing countermeasures against biological weapons. Now her son was dying from symptoms that matched theoretical bioweapon profiles. Coincidence was possible, but in her experience, coincidences usually weren't. "I'm coming home," she told Dr. Torres. "I'll be there as soon as possible." "Dr. Mitchell, I have to ask, is there anything in your work, your background, that might explain what's happening to Ethan?" The question hung in the desert air like smoke. Sarah's mind raced through security protocols, non-disclosure agreements, the oath she had first sworn when she received clearance to work with classified biological materials. Even acknowledging that such materials existed could be considered a breach.
But her son was dying. "I can't discuss the specifics," she said carefully. "But yes, there might be a connection." "Then we need to work together. Whatever this is, conventional treatments aren't working. Ethan's condition is deteriorating rapidly." Sarah ended the call and stared at the stars. Somewhere up there, satellites were relaying encrypted communications between government facilities, monitoring threats that most Americans would never know existed. The infrastructure of national security operated continuously, invisibly, protecting people who slept soundly in their beds. But that same infrastructure was now the barrier between her and her dying son. Her secure phone buzzed with an incoming message from Dr. Marcus Webb, her research partner in the facility below. "Sarah, where are you? We're ready for the final synthesis phase. Your protein work is crucial for the next step." She thought about the months of preparation that had led to this moment, the intelligence that had identified the bioweapon threat, the painstaking research to understand its molecular structure, the political pressure from the highest levels of government to develop a countermeasure quickly, quietly, efficiently. If her team succeeded in the next 12 hours, they would have a vaccine that could protect millions of people from a weapon designed to kill indiscriminately. The bioterrorist cell in Eastern Europe would be neutralized, their plans rendered useless. If she left now, that timeline collapsed. Other scientists could eventually complete the work, but the delay could be catastrophic if the weapon was deployed during the gap in their defenses. Sarah pulled up the contact information for General Hayes. One phone call would explain her situation, request emergency leave, begin the process of extracting her from the mission. The general was a mother herself. She would understand. But understanding and authorization were different things. National security operated on cold calculations, weighing individual suffering against collective protection. Sarah had signed agreements acknowledging that her personal emergencies couldn't supersede operational requirements. Her fingers traced the numbers on the keypad without dialing. In the distance, she could see the lights of Las Vegas, a city full of people living normal lives, unaware that their safety depended on work happening in secret facilities scattered across the desert. Ethan was one of those people, innocent, protected by systems he couldn't understand. But now, he was also potentially a victim of those same systems, caught in a web of classified dangers that existed precisely because people like Sarah worked to keep such threats contained. The desert wind carried the scent of sage and dust, reminders of the natural world that existed beyond security clearances and classified operations. Sarah remembered camping with Ethan the previous summer, teaching him to identify constellations, watching his eyes widen with wonder at the vastness of the night sky. "Mommy, do you think there are other kids like me on other planets?" he asked. "Maybe," she'd answered, "but I know there's only one Ethan in the entire universe." Now that unique, irreplaceable boy was fighting for his life while she stood in the desert torn between saving him and saving everyone else. Her secure phone rang. Dr. Webb's name appeared on the display. "Sarah, we have a problem down here. The protein synthesis is showing unexpected variations. We need your expertise immediately." "Marcus, she started, then stopped. How could she explain that while they worked to save theoretical future victims, her actual son was dying from symptoms that might be connected to their very research? "Sarah, are you there?" She looked up at the stars one more time, thinking of Ethan lying in a hospital bed, confused and frightened, asking nurses when her mother would come home. "I'm here. I'm coming down." The elevator descended back into the classified world below, carrying her away from her son and deeper into the impossible choice that would define both their futures.
Sarah's badge beeped against the laboratory's security scanner at 0428 hours. Dr. Marcus Webb looked up from his microscope, relief evident on his weathered face. At 52, Marcus had spent more years in classified facilities than Sarah had been alive, and his instincts for reading people were sharp. "The protein synthesis is behaving erratically," he said without preamble. "We're getting folding patterns that don't match our models." Sarah moved to her workstation, but her hands trembled as she pulled up the molecular data. The holographic display showed protein structures twisting in impossible configurations, defying every principle of biochemistry she'd learned at Johns Hopkins. "Sarah," Marcus's voice was gentle but firm, "what's going on? You disappeared for 40 minutes during the most critical phase of our timeline." She stared at the data, trying to focus on the scientific anomalies while her mind replayed Dr. Torres's words about Ethan's cellular damage. The patterns on her screen looked disturbingly similar to what she imagined was happening inside her son's body. Organized chaos, systems turning against themselves. "My son is sick," she said finally. Marcus set down his tools. In their 3 years working together on various classified projects, Sarah had never mentioned personal problems during operations. She was known for her laser focus, her ability to compartmentalize completely. "How sick?" "Dying sick. Maybe connected to our work sick." The laboratory fell silent except for the hum of equipment. Dr. Lisa Chen, working at the adjacent station, pretended not to listen while obviously absorbing every word. Colonel Anderson, the military liaison, emerged from the secure communication booth where he'd been coordinating with Pentagon analysts. "Dr. Mitchell," the colonel said formally, "are you suggesting a security breach?" Sarah faced her three colleagues, people she'd trusted with her life on previous missions. They deserved the truth, or at least as much truth as she could legally provide. 3 days ago, my 8-year-old son was healthy. Today, he's in intensive care with symptoms that match profiles we've studied in theoretical bioweapon scenarios. The timing coincides exactly with our work on Project Nightfall. Colonel Anderson's expression hardened. "You're suggesting someone targeted your family to compromise this operation." "I'm suggesting," Sarah said carefully, "that I need to investigate the possibility while continuing my work here." Lisa Chen spoke up for the first time. "Sarah, if there's even a chance that hostile actors know about this facility, about our work, we need to implement immediate security protocols." "Which would shut down our research for weeks," Marcus added, "just when we're on the verge of breakthrough." Sarah pulled up her personal phone, showing them a photo of Ethan from his last baseball game. Grass stains on his uniform, gap-toothed grin, trophy raised above his head. "This is what's at stake for me personally. But I understand what's at stake globally." She took a breath, feeling the weight of the decision crystallizing. "I'm going to work both problems simultaneously." "That's impossible," Colonel Anderson said. "Security protocols don't allow—" "Colonel, with respect, my son is potentially the first casualty of whatever we're fighting here. That makes him directly relevant to our mission." Sarah moved to the secure communication terminal, her fingers flying over the encrypted keyboard. Years of classified work had taught her how to navigate bureaucratic systems, how to find loopholes in seemingly rigid protocols. "I'm requesting immediate consultation with the CDC's Epidemic Intelligence Service. Under the Biological Defense Research Authorization, I can justify bringing in external medical expertise if it relates to potential bioweapon deployment on American soil." Marcus leaned over her shoulder, reading the authorization code she was entering. "You're classifying your son's case as a possible bioattack?" "I'm classifying it as an anomalous medical event that requires investigation within the context of current threat assessments." The terminal chimed as her request processed through multiple layers of security review. Within minutes, a response appeared. "Authorization granted for limited medical consultation. Dr. Rachel Torres, Denver Children's Hospital, granted temporary Level 2 clearance for case discussion." Lisa Chen whistled softly. "You just gave a civilian pediatrician security clearance." "I gave a pediatrician treating a potential bioweapon victim the minimum clearance necessary to save his life while protecting operational security." Sarah's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Dr. Torres. She activated the secure line, putting the conversation on the laboratory's encrypted speakers. "Dr. Mitchell, I followed your instructions about isolation and sample preservation, but I need to tell you, Ethan's condition has worsened significantly in the past hour." Sarah gripped the edge of the workstation. "Describe the progression." "His fever spiked to 104.8 degrees despite aggressive cooling measures. We're seeing kidney function decline and signs of neurological involvement. The cellular breakdown is accelerating." "Dr. Torres, I'm about to share classified information with you under emergency medical protocols. You're now operating under temporary security clearance. Do you understand the implications?" "I understand that my patient is dying and conventional medicine isn't working." Sarah looked around the laboratory at her colleagues who had stopped their work to listen. "We're investigating a potential bioweapon designed to trigger autoimmune cascades in specific populations. The symptoms you're describing match theoretical deployment scenarios." "Are you telling me someone poisoned an 8-year-old boy?" "I'm telling you that we need to treat his condition as if that's a possibility, while simultaneously developing countermeasures that could save him and prevent wider deployment." Dr. Torres was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was steady and professional. "What do you need from me?" "Complete molecular analysis of his blood chemistry. I'm sending you specifications for tests that aren't normally available in civilian hospitals. The CDC will coordinate delivery of necessary equipment within the hour." "And his treatment protocol?" Sarah pulled up the theoretical countermeasures her team had been developing. We're going to try experimental therapies. Some of them don't officially exist yet. Dr. Mitchell, Colonel Anderson interrupted, you're talking about using unproven treatments on a child. I'm talking about using the most advanced medical science available to save my son's life while simultaneously field testing countermeasures that could save thousands of other lives. She turned back to the communication terminal. Dr. Torres, I'm sending you molecular formulas for synthetic antibodies we've been developing. They're designed to interrupt the autoimmune cascade process. Can your hospital pharmacy synthesize them? Not normally, but I have contacts at the University of Colorado Medical School. Their research facility could produce small quantities for emergency use. Do it. And Dr. Torres, everything we discuss from this point forward is classified at the highest levels. You cannot discuss Ethan's case with anyone not specifically cleared for this operation. I understand, but Dr. Mitchell, you should know that your ex-husband has been asking questions. He's demanding explanations about why his son is suddenly classified as a matter of national security. Sarah closed her eyes. She'd managed to bring medical expertise into the classified world, but she couldn't bring David into it. He lacked security clearance, and more importantly, he lacked the temperament for this kind of crisis. David was a high school history teacher who believed in transparency and normal procedures. He couldn't understand that sometimes saving people required operating in shadows. Handle David however you need to, but keep him away from operational details. Marcus said quietly, "You realize what you're doing, Sarah. You're running 2 simultaneous operations, one to save the world, one to save your son. The cognitive load alone could compromise both missions. Then I'll have to be better than I've ever been before." She moved to her primary workstation and began pulling up both sets of data, the bioweapon countermeasures her team had been developing, and the medical files Dr. Torres was transmitting about Ethan's condition. The screens filled with molecular diagrams, treatment protocols, and real-time medical monitoring data. Lisa, I need you to run parallel simulations on the synthetic antibody formulas. Test them against both the theoretical bioweapon we're countering and the actual symptoms manifesting in my son's case. That's actually brilliant, Lisa said slowly. If your son was exposed to a variant of the weapon, his case becomes the perfect testing ground for our countermeasures. Colonel, I need you to coordinate with Denver authorities. If hostile actors targeted my family, they might not be finished. Ethan could be a test case for wider deployment. Colonel Anderson nodded grimly. I'll have security teams monitoring the hospital and your ex-husband's residence. At 0630 hours, Sarah stood in the facility's secure video conference room, watching live feeds from 3 locations simultaneously. On the left screen, Dr. Torres worked with a team of specialists at Denver Children's Hospital, preparing the first dose of experimental synthetic antibodies. The center screen showed University of Colorado's biochemistry lab, where graduate students were synthesizing compounds that didn't officially exist. The right screen displayed real-time satellite imagery of her ex-husband David's house, where 2 unmarked vehicles maintained discreet surveillance. "Sarah, we've got something." Lisa Chen's voice crackled through the intercom system. The molecular analysis of Ethan's blood samples shows traces of engineered proteins. Sarah's stomach dropped. Confirmation meant someone had deliberately infected her son with a biological weapon. "Show me." Lisa's data appeared on a 4th monitor. The protein structures were elegant in their lethality, designed to hijack the immune system's own mechanisms, turning protective responses into destructive ones. But there were subtle differences from the bioweapon her team had been studying. "This is a variant," Sarah said, studying the molecular diagrams, "more refined than what our intelligence suggested the Eastern European cell had developed." "Which means," Marcus added, entering the conference room with a steaming cup of coffee and grim expression, "either they're further along than we thought, or there's a second group working independently." Colonel Anderson's voice came through the secure communication system from his coordination center. "Dr. Mitchell, we have updates from the field teams monitoring your family. Your ex-husband received a phone call at 0545 hours from someone claiming to be a medical insurance investigator. They asked detailed questions about your employment history and security clearance level." They're fishing for information, Sarah realized, trying to determine how much David knows about my work. More concerning, the colonel continued, we detected electronic surveillance equipment in the parking garage of his apartment building. Someone's been watching your family for at least a week. Sarah closed her eyes, processing the implications. A week ago, she'd been home for Ethan's school science fair, helping him explain his project on crystallization to the judges. She'd been careful, as always, never discussing work at home, never bringing classified materials into her personal life. But apparently, her operational security hadn't prevented someone from identifying her son as leverage. Dr. Torres, Sarah spoke to the hospital feed, what's Ethan's current status? We've stabilized his temperature, but the cellular breakdown is continuing. His kidney function has declined another 15% since we started monitoring. Dr. Mitchell, I need to be honest. At this rate, we have maybe 18 hours before organ failure becomes irreversible. 18 hours. Sarah looked at her primary workstation, where the countdown timer for Project Nightfall showed 36 hours until their original deadline, half the time she had planned to have. The synthetic antibodies will be ready for administration in 2 hours, Dr. Torres continued, but I have to warn you, we're essentially experimenting on a child with compounds that have never been tested on humans. They've been tested, Sarah said quietly, just not by us. Lisa looked up from her molecular analysis. Sarah, what do you mean? Someone used my son as a test subject for their weapon. They know exactly how these engineered proteins behave in human subjects. Ethan's medical progression is probably following a predetermined timeline. She pulled up her secure communication terminal and began typing rapidly. I'm requesting immediate intelligence analysis on any missing persons cases in the past 6 months that match Ethan's demographics. Children between the ages of 6 and 12, parents with sensitive government security clearances, unexplained medical crises that resolved quickly or resulted in death. Within minutes, data began streaming across her screen. Sarah's blood chilled as she read the classified reports. A 7-year-old girl in Virginia whose mother worked for the NSA, hospitalized with mysterious autoimmune symptoms that disappeared after 72 hours. A 9-year-old boy in Texas whose father designed military communication systems, dead from what doctors called an aggressive but unidentifiable virus. 3 more cases across the country, all children of parents with sensitive government positions. They've been testing their weapons systematically, Sarah announced to her team. Ethan isn't the first. He's just the first time they targeted someone with the expertise to fight back. Marcus leaned over her shoulder, reading the intelligence reports. These other cases, were any of the children saved? 2 recovered completely after exactly 72 hours. The others died within 48 hours. The recovery cases suggest they have an antidote. Or a timer, Lisa added grimly. Maybe the weapon is designed to self-destruct after a certain period, leaving no forensic evidence. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from David. Hospital won't let me speak to Ethan's doctors anymore. They say everything is classified now. What kind of sick is he that it involves the government? She stared at the message, knowing she couldn't answer honestly. David lived in a world where childhood illnesses meant strep throat and broken bones, where the worst enemies were pop quizzes and bullies at school. He couldn't understand that his son had become a casualty in a war most people didn't know existed. Dr. Torres, I need you to allow limited family contact. David is Ethan's father, and isolation will only increase suspicion. Understood, but he's asking questions I can't answer. Tell him it's a rare genetic condition that requires experimental treatment. Tell him the CDC is involved because of the unusual presentation. Don't mention bioweapons. Don't mention classified research. Sarah turned back to her team. We need to accelerate everything. If the pattern holds, Ethan has less than 18 hours before his condition becomes irreversible. But we also need to consider the possibility that he's not just a victim, he's bait. Bait for what? Colonel Anderson asked through the communication system. To force me to compromise operational security, to make me reveal our countermeasures, our research methods, our facility locations. They infected my son knowing I'd move heaven and earth to save him. Lisa stopped her molecular analysis, understanding dawning in her expression. They're not just testing their weapon, they're testing us, seeing how we respond to a targeted attack on one of our own. Which means, Marcus added slowly, they're probably monitoring everything we're doing right now. Sarah felt the weight of invisible watchers, hostile intelligence analysts studying her every decision. But instead of paralysis, she felt a cold clarity settling over her thoughts. If they wanted to see how she responded to threats against her family, she'd show them. Colonel, I need you to coordinate with NSA Cyber Warfare Division. I want to know who's watching us watch them, and I want to feed them false information. What kind of false information? Make them think our countermeasures aren't working, that we're desperate, making mistakes, compromising security out of panic. Sarah moved to her workstation and began pulling up fabricated research data. To any hostile observer, it would appear that Project Nightfall was collapsing under the pressure of a personal crisis. Dr. Torres, are you ready to administer the synthetic antibodies? We're setting up the IV now. Ethan is conscious and asking for you. Sarah's professional composure cracked slightly. Tell him Mommy is working to make him better. Tell him to be brave for just a little longer. Sarah, Lisa said softly, what if this doesn't work? What if the synthetic antibodies aren't effective against this variant of the weapon? Sarah looked around the laboratory at her colleagues, people who had become her closest friends through years of classified work. They were asking her to bet her son's life on untested science while simultaneously trying to save the world. Then we'll try something else, she said simply, and something else after that. We'll keep trying until we find something that works. And if we run out of time... Sarah turned back to the monitors showing her son's medical data, the synthetic antibody production, the surveillance feeds from David's neighborhood. Somewhere out there, hostile actors were watching her every move to wait to see if a mother's love could compromise national security. They were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is someone with nothing left to lose. We won't run out of time, she said with quiet certainty, because failure isn't an option when your child is counting on you.
At 0847 hours, every alarm in the underground facility began screaming simultaneously. Sarah looked up from her workstation where she'd been monitoring Ethan's response to the synthetic antibodies, now flowing through his small body via IV drip 200 miles away in Denver. Containment breach in Laboratory 7, Colonel Anderson's voice boomed through the emergency communication system. All personnel to secure positions immediately. Laboratory 7 housed the original bioweapon samples from Eastern Europe, the ones her team had been developing countermeasures against. Sarah's blood turned to ice as she realized what this meant. While she'd been focused on saving her son, someone had infiltrated their secure facility. Sarah, get to the safe room, Marcus shouted over the alarms, but she was already moving toward Laboratory 7 instead. Are you insane? Lisa grabbed her arm. Containment breach means potential exposure to biological agents. It means someone wanted us distracted while they accessed our research, Sarah replied, pulling on a hazmat suit with practiced efficiency. And I need to know if they got what they came for. Through the reinforced glass of Laboratory 7, she could see the aftermath of a precisely executed operation. The secured storage units had been opened with sophisticated equipment, not brute force. Whoever had done this possessed both advanced technology and detailed knowledge of the facility's security systems. But most chilling of all, they'd left behind a single item that hadn't been there before. A child's baseball glove, small enough to fit an 8-year-old's hand. Ethan's glove, the one he'd been wearing at his last game, the one Sarah had promised to oil and condition when she returned from her mission. Colonel Anderson appeared beside her in full protective gear. Dr. Mitchell, the breach was surgically precise. They knew exactly which samples to take and which to leave behind. They took the primary bioweapon samples? No, they took your research notes on the countermeasures. And they left this. He handed her a sealed envelope with her name written in block letters. Sarah opened it with trembling hands, revealing a photograph of Ethan taken in his hospital room less than an hour ago. He was sleeping, connected to multiple monitors, the IV delivering her synthetic antibodies visible in the image. Below the photograph, a single sentence was typed on government letterhead. Your countermeasures are working. Congratulations, Dr. Mitchell. Sarah stared at the message, her mind racing through the implications. They weren't just testing their bioweapon on her son, they were testing her response, studying her research methods, learning from her countermeasures. They're inside our security apparatus, she realized aloud. This letterhead, the access to classified facilities, the timing. Someone with high-level clearance is feeding them information. Dr. Mitchell, Dr. Torres's voice came through her secure phone. I have urgent news about Ethan's condition. Sarah activated the secure video link, seeing the pediatrician's excited but cautious expression on her screen. The synthetic antibodies are working! His cellular regeneration has increased by 30% in the past hour. But there's something else. We're detecting traces of a secondary compound in his bloodstream that wasn't there before. What kind of secondary compound? It appears to be another engineered protein, but this one is designed to enhance healing rather than cause damage. Someone administered a separate treatment to your son. Sarah's hands went cold. Dr. Torres, I need you to immediately test that secondary compound, and I need complete security footage from Ethan's room for the past 2 hours. She turned to Colonel Anderson. They're not trying to kill my son. They're using him as a testing ground for both their weapon and their antidote. They want to perfect the entire system before deploying it widely. Which means, Marcus said, joining them in Laboratory 7, they needed your research to understand how to counter their own weapon, effectively. Sarah, Lisa's voice came through the intercom from the main laboratory. I'm analyzing the data from the breach. They didn't just take your countermeasure research, they left behind modified versions.
Sarah rushed back to the main laboratory where Lisa was displaying molecular diagrams on the holographic projector. The structures showed the same synthetic antibodies Sarah had developed, but with subtle modifications that made them more effective. They improved your work, Lisa said in amazement. These modifications would increase efficacy by nearly 40%. They're teaching us how to save people from their own weapon, Sarah breathed. But why? Her secure phone rang. The caller ID showed only a blocked number, but somehow she knew who it would be. Dr. Sarah Mitchell? A cultured voice said when she answered. My name is Dr. Victor Petrov. I believe we have much to discuss. You're the one who infected my son? I am the one who chose your son as the ideal test subject for our work, yes, but I am also the one who just saved his life. Sarah gestured frantically to Colonel Anderson, who began initiating trace protocols on the call. What do you want? She asked. I want what you want, Dr. Mitchell, to save lives. Our bioweapon was never intended for deployment against innocent populations. It was designed as a defensive measure against a far greater threat. I don't believe you. Then let me tell you about the Chinese military research facility in Wuhan that has been developing an airborne pathogen with 90% mortality rates, or the Russian biological weapons program that has been testing compounds designed to target specific genetic markers. The weapon we developed was created to neutralize those threats before they could be deployed. Sarah's mind reeled. You're claiming you're the good guys? I am claiming that the world of biological warfare is more complex than your government has told you. Your Project Nightfall was designed to counter our weapon, yes, but our weapon was designed to counter far worse weapons that would make your son's current condition seem mild by comparison. Dr. Torres's voice interrupted through the secure video link. Dr. Mitchell, Ethan is awake and asking for you. His vital signs are stabilizing rapidly. Sarah looked at the image of her son now sitting up in his hospital bed, color returning to his cheeks as both her synthetic antibodies and Petrov's antidote worked in his system. Dr. Petrov, she said into the phone, if you're really trying to protect people, why target children of government employees? Because we needed to ensure that the most brilliant minds in biodefense would be personally motivated to develop effective countermeasures. Your research, driven by maternal instinct, has advanced our mutual understanding by months. You used my son as leverage. I used your son as inspiration. And the result is that we now have countermeasures against multiple biological threats that neither of our organizations could have developed independently. Colonel Anderson held up a tablet showing the trace results. The call was bouncing through encrypted relays across 6 countries, making location impossible to determine. What happens now? Sarah asked. Now, Dr. Mitchell, you have a choice. You can continue working within your government's limited understanding of the biological warfare landscape, developing countermeasures against individual threats as they emerge. Or you can work with us to address the systemic problem, to create defenses against the entire spectrum of biological weapons currently being developed by hostile nations. Sarah looked around the laboratory at her colleagues, all listening intently to this impossible conversation. And if I refuse, then your son recovers completely, you complete Project Nightfall successfully, and you never hear from us again.
But when the next biological attack occurs, and it will occur, remember that you had the opportunity to prevent it. The call ended, leaving Sarah staring at her phone while alarms continued to sound throughout the facility. Her son was going to live, but the price of his salvation might be a choice between protecting America's secrets and protecting the entire world from threats she was only beginning to understand. Sarah stood in the facility's secure communications center at 11:34 hours, watching live satellite feeds of 3 locations that would change everything she thought she knew about biological warfare. On her left monitor, a Chinese military installation where figures in hazmat suits moved between buildings marked with biohazard symbols. Center screen, a Russian research complex where trucks loaded with sealed containers departed under heavy guard. Right screen, a facility in North Korea where construction crews were building what looked like mass production laboratories. These images were taken in the past 72 hours, General Patricia Hayes explained through the encrypted video link from the Pentagon. Your conversation with Dr. Petrov triggered a deep intelligence review. What we found contradicts everything we thought we knew about current biological threats. Colonel Anderson leaned forward in his chair. General, are you confirming that Petrov's claims about defensive biological weapons have merit? I'm confirming that while we've been focused on his organization as a primary threat, we've been missing the development of weapons that make his bioagent look like a common cold. Sarah studied the satellite images, her trained eye identifying equipment configurations and facility layouts. These installations are designed for mass production and deployment, not research and development. They're preparing to manufacture biological weapons on an industrial scale. Our timeline estimates suggest coordinated deployment within 6 months, General Hayes continued. The Chinese variant targets respiratory systems with airborne transmission. The Russian version attacks the nervous system through water supplies. The North Korean weapon appears designed to destroy agricultural systems, creating famine conditions. Dr. Torres's voice came through Sarah's secure phone from Denver Children's Hospital. Dr. Mitchell, I have remarkable news about Ethan's recovery. Not only are his vital signs completely normal, but his immune system appears to have developed resistance to a broad spectrum of biological agents. Sarah activated the hospital video feed, showing Ethan sitting up in bed, eating breakfast with obvious appetite. His color was healthy, his eyes bright and alert. He looked better than he had in weeks, even before his illness. The combination of your synthetic antibodies and Dr. Petrov's antidote created something unprecedented. Dr. Torres explained, Ethan's immune system has essentially been upgraded. He now carries antibodies against biological agents that don't officially exist. Dr. Torres, Sarah said carefully, preserve samples of Ethan's current blood chemistry. Those antibodies might be the key to protecting other people. Lisa Chen looked up from her workstation where she'd been analyzing the modified countermeasures Petrov's team had left behind. Sarah, I've been reverse engineering their improvements to our synthetic antibodies. They've solved problems we didn't even know existed. What kind of problems? Delivery mechanisms for rapid deployment, molecular stability in various environmental conditions, broad-spectrum effectiveness against multiple pathogen types. This isn't just more advanced than our research, it's more advanced than anything in the scientific literature. Marcus joined them from the molecular synthesis lab, carrying a tablet displaying complex chemical formulas. I've been testing their modified antibodies against the samples from all 3 foreign installations. The effectiveness rates are extraordinary. 97% neutralization against the Chinese airborne pathogen, 94% against the Russian neurotoxin, and 91% against the North Korean agricultural bioweapon. Sarah felt the weight of impossible decisions pressing down on her. They didn't just use my son to test their antidote. They used him to create a universal biological defense system. Her secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Dr. Petrov. Dr. Mitchell, your son's recovery demonstrates the potential for protecting all children from the threats currently being manufactured in China, Russia, and North Korea. Are you ready to discuss cooperation? She showed the message to Colonel Anderson, who immediately began tracing protocols. Dr. Mitchell, I need to advise you that any communication with Dr. Petrov constitutes contact with a foreign intelligence asset, and ignoring him constitutes allowing the development of biological weapons that could kill millions of people. General Hayes' voice came through the Pentagon link. Dr. Mitchell, you're being offered a unique opportunity to participate in a joint intelligence operation. We want you to accept Petrov's invitation for cooperation. Sarah stared at the image of the general on the screen. You want me to work with the people who infected my son?
We want you to work with the people who saved your son while simultaneously providing us intelligence on biological threats that our conventional sources missed entirely. This is insane, Marcus said. We're talking about collaborating with hostile foreign agents. We're talking about collaborating with people who appear to be fighting the same enemies we are, General Hayes corrected. Dr. Mitchell's personal crisis has revealed the existence of a parallel biological defense network that operates outside normal diplomatic channels. Sarah walked to the secure video link showing Ethan in his hospital room. He was drawing pictures with crayons, probably creating get-well cards for other sick children. His innocence and health, restored through the combined efforts of two opposing organizations, seemed to symbolize possibilities she'd never considered. General Hayes, what exactly are you asking me to do? We want you to accept Petrov's invitation to visit their primary research facility. You'll carry monitoring equipment that will allow us to gather intelligence on their capabilities while ostensibly participating in joint research projects. You want me to spy on people who just saved my son's life? We want you to determine whether those people represent an opportunity for cooperation or a continuing threat to national security. Dr. Torres's voice interrupted from the hospital feed. Dr. Mitchell, Ethan is asking when he can go home. His recovery is so complete that we're running out of medical justification for keeping him hospitalized. Sarah looked at her son, healthy and happy, protected by antibodies that resulted from the most terrifying experience of her life. The irony wasn't lost on her. In order to save him, she'd had to trust people she'd been trained to consider enemies. Dr. Torres, begin discharge procedures for Ethan, but I want him moved to a secure facility with military medical support. Sarah, Lisa said quietly, are you seriously considering working with Petrov? I'm seriously considering that my son is alive because someone was willing to think beyond traditional definitions of allies and enemies. She turned to face her team, these colleagues who had supported her through the most challenging crisis of her career. What if we've been approaching biological defense all wrong? What if instead of developing countermeasures against individual threats, we should be creating comprehensive protection against the entire spectrum of biological warfare? That's exactly what Petrov is offering. But at what cost? Sarah's phone buzzed with another message from Petrov. Dr. Mitchell, I am sending coordinates for a research facility in Switzerland. It operates under international medical humanitarian protocols, not military jurisdiction. Your son is welcome to accompany you for continued monitoring of his remarkable recovery. She stared at the message, understanding that her next decision would define not just her career, but potentially the future of biological defense for millions of people. Colonel Anderson, what are the risks if I accept Petrov's invitation? You could be walking into a trap, compromising classified information, or being recruited as a foreign asset. And what are the risks if I refuse? We continue operating with incomplete intelligence while biological weapons are mass-produced by hostile nations, potentially leading to casualties that make current terrorist threats look insignificant. Sarah looked around the laboratory that had been her world for the past week, at the equipment that had helped save her son, at the colleagues who had risked their careers to support her impossible mission. General Hayes, I need authorization for extended operational assignment outside normal protocols. Dr. Mitchell, are you accepting Petrov's invitation? Sarah thought about Ethan, healthy and protected by antibodies that shouldn't exist. She thought about other children whose parents might face similar choices in the future. She thought about the satellite images showing biological weapons factories operating while traditional intelligence agencies focused on smaller threats. I'm accepting the opportunity to protect my son and every other child from biological weapons that are being developed while we debate jurisdictional boundaries. The decision was made. In 6 hours, she would be on a military transport to Switzerland, carrying monitoring equipment and the hope that sometimes the most important alliances formed between former enemies. The helicopter descended through alpine fog toward a research facility that didn't appear on any official maps. Sarah gripped Ethan's hand as they looked out up the Swiss mountainside, where a complex of glass and steel buildings emerged from the mist like something from a science fiction film. Her son had insisted on coming with her, and after everything they'd been through, she couldn't bear to leave him behind again. "Mom, it looks like the Stark Industries building from the movies," Ethan said, his 8-year-old imagination finding wonder even in their extraordinary circumstances. "It kind of does, doesn't it?" Sarah smiled, marveling at his resilience. 3 days ago, he'd been dying in a hospital bed. Now he was accompanying her on what might be the most important mission of her career. Dr. Viktor Petrov stood waiting on the landing pad as their helicopter touched down. In person, he appeared exactly as Dr. Torres had described, silver-haired, military-bearing, but with kind eyes that focused immediately on Ethan with genuine concern. "Dr. Mitchell, and you must be Ethan," he said, kneeling to the boy's eye level. "I'm very glad to see you looking so healthy." "Are you the doctor who helped make me better?" Ethan asked with typical 8-year-old directness. "I'm one of the doctors, yes. Your mother did most of the important work." Sarah studied Petrov's face, looking for deception or manipulation. Instead, she saw something unexpected: relief. He'd been genuinely worried about whether his experimental treatment would work. "Dr. Petrov, before we proceed with any cooperation, I need answers about your organization, your methods, and your true objectives." "Of course. But first, let me show you why those answers are more complex than either of our governments understand." He led them through security checkpoints that rivaled anything Sarah had seen in classified American facilities. The technology was advanced, but also somehow different, designed for transparency rather than secrecy. Glass walls allowed observation between laboratories, and digital displays showed real-time research data that visitors could access. "Traditional biological weapons research operates in isolation," Petrov explained as they walked through a corridor lined with laboratories. "Each nation develops threats and countermeasures independently, creating an arms race that benefits no one except the weapons manufacturers." They entered a vast central laboratory where scientists from multiple countries worked side by side. Sarah recognized equipment configurations from American, European, and Asian research facilities, all integrated into a unified system. "This facility operates under international humanitarian protocols," Petrov continued. "We share research on biological threats regardless of which nation created them. Our goal is comprehensive defense, not national advantage." "That's a beautiful ideal," Sarah said carefully, "but how do you ensure that shared defensive research isn't weaponized?" "By making the defensive measures so effective that biological weapons become obsolete," a new voice said behind them. Sarah turned to see Dr. Elena Volkov, a woman she recognized from classified intelligence reports as one of Russia's leading biochemists. Supposedly, Dr. Volkov had defected 2 years ago, but apparently she'd simply joined a different kind of organization. "Dr. Mitchell," Elena said warmly, "your synthetic antibody research has been crucial to our latest breakthrough. Combined with advances from Chinese and Indian researchers, we've developed something unprecedented." She led them to a demonstration laboratory where holographic displays showed molecular interactions in real time. "Universal biological immunity," Elena announced. "Not just countermeasures against specific threats, but adaptive immune enhancement that responds to any biological agent." Sarah studied the molecular diagrams, her expertise allowing her to understand the elegant complexity of what they'd achieved. "This is incredible, but the testing required to develop something like this was conducted using volunteers from our research staff, including myself. We tested every compound on ourselves before considering deployment to anyone else." "Then why use my son?" "Because we needed to test effectiveness against someone with no prior exposure to biological weapons agents. Our research staff had all been exposed to various compounds during our work. Ethan provided a clean baseline for measuring true protective capability." Sarah felt anger flaring again, but Ethan tugged on her sleeve. "Mom, can I see the computers that show the medicine working?" A young technician, probably a graduate student, overheard and approached. "Would you like to see your own blood cells on the monitor?" she asked Ethan. "We can show you how the special antibodies are protecting you." As Ethan was distracted by the fascinating display of his own enhanced immune system, Sarah found herself facing the moral complexity of what Petrov's organization had accomplished. "Dr. Petrov, you've essentially created a biological defense system that could protect humanity from any biological threat. But you did it by experimenting on children without their consent. I did it by creating a defense system that will protect Ethan and millions of other children from biological weapons that are currently being manufactured by hostile governments," he replied. The ethical choice was between risking harm to a few individuals or accepting certain death for many more. Dr. Elena approached them with a tablet displaying global threat assessments. "Dr. Mitchell, in the time you've been here, we've detected 3 new biological weapons tests, one in Syria, one in Myanmar, one in a location we haven't yet identified. Each represents a potential pandemic that could kill hundreds of thousands of people." Sarah studied the data, recognizing molecular signatures that matched nothing in American intelligence databases. "How are you detecting these tests?" "Through the monitoring network we've established over the past 5 years, every person who receives our universal immunity treatment becomes a biological sensor, capable of detecting exposure to unknown agents. You're creating a human early warning system. We're creating a human protection system. The early warning capability is a beneficial side effect." Sarah's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Colonel Anderson. "Dr. Mitchell, satellite intelligence confirms biological weapons testing in Syria and Myanmar within the past 6 hours. How did they detect these events before our systems?" She showed the message to Petrov and smiled grimly. "Because your systems monitor for known threats. Ours monitor for unknown ones." Ethan returned from his interaction with the laboratory displays, excitement bright in his eyes. "Mom, they showed me how my blood can fight off anything bad that tries to make me sick. It's like having superpowers." From the mouths of babes, Sarah thought. Her son had just described the most advanced biological defense system ever developed as superpowers. "Dr. Petrov, if your universal immunity system is as effective as you claim, why hasn't it been deployed more widely?" "Because traditional governments prefer maintaining the illusion that they can protect their populations through military force, rather than admitting that biological threats require international cooperation." Elena pulled up additional data on her tablet. "We've offered this technology to the World Health Organization, the United Nations, even directly to the American CDC. Every approach has been blocked by political considerations. So you decided to demonstrate its effectiveness by testing it on my son. We decided to demonstrate its effectiveness by saving your son's life in a way that would force the global biological defense community to acknowledge the superiority of cooperative approaches over nationalistic ones." Sarah walked to the laboratory window, looking out at the alpine landscape where scientists from former enemy nations worked together to protect humanity from biological warfare. The scope of what they'd accomplished was staggering, but so was the moral complexity of their methods. "Dr. Petrov, what happens now? You've proven your system works. You forced international attention. What's your next step?" "It depends on you, Dr. Mitchell. You're uniquely positioned to bridge the gap between traditional government biological defense and our humanitarian approach. Your son is living proof that cooperation produces better results than competition." Sarah thought about her colleagues back in Nevada, still working within the constraints of classified research and international suspicion. She thought about the satellite images showing biological weapons factories operating while diplomatic channels remained paralyzed by political considerations. Most of all, she thought about Ethan, healthy and protected by antibodies that resulted from the most terrifying and transformative week of their lives. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Help us save the world, Dr. Mitchell, one child at a time."
6 months later, Sarah stood before a joint session of the United Nations Security Council in New York, watching world leaders grapple with a reality that would have been unimaginable before her son's illness changed everything. On the screen behind her, a global map showed real-time biological threat detection data from over 10,000 individuals across 47 countries, all recipients of the universal immunity treatment that had saved Ethan's life. "Madam President, distinguished delegates," Sarah began, addressing the assembly with confidence born from experience that no diplomatic training could provide. In the past 6 months, the International Biological Defense Network has prevented 14 potential pandemic outbreaks, neutralized 8 biological weapons attacks, and provided early warning for contamination events that saved an estimated 2.3 million lives. The Chinese representative leaned forward in his seat. "Dr. Mitchell, your organization operates outside traditional diplomatic channels. How can member nations trust intelligence gathered through unauthorized means?" Sarah smiled, thinking of Ethan, now 9 years old and thriving in the specialized school program designed for children with enhanced immunity. He'd become something of a celebrity among the other kids, not because of his medical condition, but because of his baseball card collection and his ability to solve math problems that stumped his teachers. "Ambassador Chen, the children in your country who are alive today because we detected and neutralized the biological contamination in Shanghai 3 weeks ago might disagree with your characterization of our methods as unauthorized." She clicked to the next slide, showing molecular diagrams that represented humanity's new biological defenses. "What we've accomplished transcends traditional concepts of national security, because biological threats don't respect international borders. A pathogen released in one country can circle the globe in less than 24 hours. Dr. Elena Volkov, now serving as the network's Director of International Coordination, approached the podium beside Sarah. In the months since their first meeting in Switzerland, Elena had become not just a colleague, but a close friend, proof that former enemies could become powerful allies when focused on protecting humanity rather than defending territories. "The data speaks for itself," Elena said, her Russian accent softened by years of working with international teams. "Traditional biological defense systems detected 0% of the threats we've neutralized. Government intelligence agencies missed biological weapons tests that our network identified within hours of deployment." Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from David. "Watching you on TV, Ethan says to tell the important people that his mom is a real-life superhero. He's right." The message brought tears to her eyes. David had struggled initially with the transformation of their quiet life into something resembling a spy thriller, but he'd come to understand that their son's survival had made them part of something larger than themselves. "Dr. Mitchell," the British representative interrupted her thoughts, "what guarantees can you provide that this universal immunity system won't be weaponized by hostile actors?" "The same guarantee I can provide that medical knowledge won't be misused by criminals, or that nuclear physics won't enable warfare," Sarah replied. "None. But the alternative to sharing defensive medical knowledge is accepting that biological weapons will proliferate unchecked until they destroy the civilization we're trying to protect." She clicked to the next slide, showing photographs of children from around the world, recipients of the immunity treatment, who now served as both protected individuals and early warning sensors for biological threats. These children represent the future of global biological security. They're not soldiers or intelligence assets. They're ordinary kids who happen to carry extraordinary protection against biological warfare. When they're exposed to unknown pathogens, we know within hours instead of weeks. When biological weapons are tested anywhere in the world, their immune systems alert us to new threats.
Marcus Webb, now serving as the network's chief scientific advisor, stood from his position in the gallery. "Madam President, if I may add, the scientific breakthrough Dr. Mitchell represents required collaboration between researchers from nations that have been adversaries for decades. The molecular biology advances we have achieved would have been impossible within traditional national research frameworks." Sarah thought about the underground facility in Nevada where this journey had begun, where she'd faced the impossible choice between saving her son and completing her classified mission. The irony was perfect. By choosing her son, she'd enabled the completion of a far more important mission than Project Nightfall could ever have been. "Dr. Petrov," she said, looking toward the gallery where Viktor Petrov sat with other network administrators, "would you like to address the delegates about our success in Syria last month?"
Petrov approached the podium with the dignified bearing that had initially intimidated Sarah, but now felt reassuring. "Ladies and gentlemen, when our network detected biological weapons deployment in the Syrian conflict zone, we provided advance warning to humanitarian organizations, enabling evacuation of civilian populations 12 hours before traditional intelligence agencies confirmed the threat. More importantly," he continued, "we provided immediate medical countermeasures to Syrian, Turkish, and Jordanian medical facilities, preventing the spread of a genetically modified hemorrhagic fever that would have killed thousands of refugees." The Syrian representative stood up, his voice emotional. "Dr. Petrov, Dr. Mitchell, your organization saved my daughter's life. She was in a refugee camp that received your early warning. My government may not officially recognize your network, but I am eternally grateful for your humanitarian work." Sarah felt the weight of unexpected responsibility. A year ago, she'd been a classified researcher working in secret to protect American interests. Now she was advocate for a global defense system that protected all humanity, regardless of nationality or politics. "Distinguished delegates," she said, returning to the podium, "the biological threats facing our world require responses that transcend traditional diplomacy. Climate change, international terrorism, cyber warfare, these challenges forced us to develop new forms of international cooperation. Biological warfare demands the same evolution." Her secure phone chimed with an alert from the network's monitoring systems. Sarah glanced at the display and felt her breath catch. "Excuse me, but I'm receiving real-time intelligence that demonstrates exactly what I'm describing." She activated the emergency protocols built into the UN's communication systems, displaying the alert on screens throughout the Security Council chamber. "Our network has just detected biological weapons testing at a facility in North Korea. The pathogen appears designed to target rice crops across Southeast Asia. Without immediate agricultural countermeasures, we're looking at potential famine affecting over 200 million people." The room erupted in urgent conversations as delegates contacted their governments. But Sarah was already coordinating response efforts through her tablet, working directly with agricultural specialists, humanitarian organizations, and network scientists scattered across the globe. "This is what the new reality looks like," she announced over the diplomatic chaos. "Biological threats detected in real time, countermeasures coordinated internationally, protection deployed without waiting for political authorization." Within 20 minutes, agricultural protection compounds were being distributed to farming communities across Southeast Asia based on molecular analysis conducted by network facilities in Switzerland, India, and Brazil. The biological weapon that might have triggered international conflict instead became a demonstration of humanity's capacity for cooperative defense. As the session recessed to allow delegates to consult with their governments, Sarah stepped outside onto the UN plaza, breathing the crisp October air. Her phone rang with a call from the specialized school where Ethan was finishing his day. "Mom," his voice was bright with excitement, "we learned about the United Nations today. My teacher said you were there talking to important people about keeping kids safe." "That's right, sweetheart. I was telling them about how brave you were when you helped us learn how to protect other children. Can I tell my friends that my mom helps save the whole world?" Sarah laughed, thinking about the impossible journey that had brought her from a desperate mother in an underground laboratory to an advocate for global biological security. "You can tell them that your mom learned everything important from watching how brave her son could be when it really mattered." Are you coming home tonight? I'm coming home tonight, and this weekend we're going to that new science museum you wanted to see. The one with the interactive biology exhibits? The one with the interactive biology exhibits.
As she ended the call, Sarah realized that the future she was building wasn't just about protecting children from biological weapons. It was about creating a world where children like Ethan could grow up understanding that science, courage, and international cooperation could solve problems that had once seemed impossible. The new reality wasn't just about survival. It was about the possibility that humanity's greatest threats could become opportunities for its greatest achievements. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.